Very hot. I'd like to do any of these two guys at the same time. What? Oh.
Hey, there you are. Now.
Again, and action.
Hey, there you are. Now.
Nope. It's the same way you did it before. Hey, there you are. Keep it always the same. Action.
Hey, there you are.
For years, Storage Wars brought laughter, rivalry, and unforgettable personalities into millions of living rooms. These were the faces fans rooted for, argued about, and felt like they knew personally. But behind the humor and competitive chaos was a quieter truth no one wanted to face. As the seasons passed and the cameras kept rolling, some of the most beloved members of the Storage Wars family were slowly disappearing from real life forever. Their stories didn't end with a final bid or a closing credits scene. They ended in ways far more heartbreaking than viewers ever imagined. And once you hear what really happened, you'll never watch the show the same way again. The first loss that shook the show. When Storage Wars first aired, no one expected it to become a cultural phenomenon. The cast felt less like reality stars and more like eccentric neighbors you couldn't help but grow attached to. That's why the first major loss connected to the show hit so hard. It wasn't just the passing of a familiar face. It was the moment fans realized these weren't characters playing roles. They were real people with real lives, real struggles, and real endings. Behind the scenes, word spread quietly at first. Crew members talked in hushed tones, and longtime fans noticed something was off before any official acknowledgement was made. The energy shifted. Laughter felt more restrained. Jokes landed differently. What had once felt carefree suddenly carried weight. This loss forced everyone involved with the show to confront something uncomfortable. Fame doesn't protect you from time, illness, or fate. For the cast, it was the first reminder that the world of storage auctions, however entertaining, existed alongside real-life fragility. For viewers, it was a wake-up call that the people they invited into their homes every week could be gone without warning. And as painful as that first loss was, it would not be the last. Because soon, another familiar face would be gone. And this time, the circumstances would raise even more questions. A fan favorite gone too soon. Some cast members stood out, not because they were loud or controversial, but because they felt genuine. They brought warmth, humor, and a sense of authenticity that made fans instantly trust them. When one such fan favorite passed away, the reaction was overwhelming. Social media flooded with messages of disbelief, grief, and confusion. What made this loss especially devastating was how unexpected it felt. There were no public warnings, no drawn-out illness shared with the world. One day, they were part of the Storage Wars universe, and the next, they were gone. Fans searched for answers, trying to piece together what had happened, but information was scarce. Those close to the situation revealed later that the pressures of life outside the show were far heavier than anyone realized. Fame brought opportunities, but it also brought stress, scrutiny, and expectations that didn't disappear when the cameras stopped rolling. For someone who thrived on being themselves, that pressure quietly took its toll. The show continued, but something irreplaceable was missing. Viewers could feel it, even if they couldn't explain it. The absence lingered in every episode, a silent reminder that Storage Wars was changing, and not for the better. And if two losses weren't enough to signal a tragic pattern, the next one would make it impossible to ignore. The death that no one saw coming. By the time Storage Wars reached the height of its popularity, the show had grown beyond a simple reality series. It had become an ecosystem. Buyers, auctioneers, crew members, and recurring figures who all played a role in keeping the auctions moving. One of those figures was Mark Balelo, a familiar face to longtime viewers who recognized him as more than just a background presence. He was part of the rhythm of the show, someone whose voice and mannerisms felt inseparable from the auction world itself. That's why the news of his death landed like a shockwave. Mark Bolello passed away in 2013, and the circumstances surrounding his death immediately cast a shadow over the Storage Wars universe. Unlike previous losses that came quietly, this one raised uncomfortable questions. Reports confirmed that his death was ruled a suicide, and suddenly, the lighthearted tone of the show felt painfully out of place. Behind the scenes, those who worked closely with him described a man who carried far more pressure than viewers ever realized. Legal troubles had begun to mount, personal struggles were intensifying, and the weight of public attention only made things heavier. For someone deeply embedded in the world of auctions, the line between professional life and personal identity had completely blurred. Fans struggled to reconcile the image they remembered on screen with the reality of what he was going through off-camera. Many asked the same question again and again. How could someone so connected, so present, fall so deeply into isolation? The show never fully addressed the emotional aftermath. Episodes continued to air, bids were placed, rivalries played out, but the absence lingered. For many fans, Mark's death marked the moment Storage Wars stopped feeling harmless. And as painful as that loss was, it opened the door to another realization. Some of the most beloved figures weren't just buyers chasing profit. They were family men, mentors, and quiet pillars behind the scenes, which made the next loss even harder to accept. A gentle presence lost to time. While some Storage Wars personalities thrived on confrontation and bravado, others stood out for a completely different reason. Gunter Nazoda was one of those people. Known to many viewers as the father of Rene Nazoda, Gunter brought warmth, humor, and an unmistakable gentleness whenever he appeared. His presence softened the chaos of the auctions, offering moments of calm amid the noise. When news broke in 2023 that Gunter had passed away, fans reacted with genuine grief. Unlike sudden tragedies, Gunter's death came after a public battle with illness, something his family had chosen to share with honesty and grace. He passed away from complications related to lung cancer, leaving behind not just a family, but a community of fans who felt they had lost a familiar, comforting figure. What made his passing especially emotional was the contrast between who he was on screen and the harsh reality of his final years. Even as his health declined, those close to him described his determination to remain positive, present, and supportive of his son. He wasn't chasing fame. He was simply being himself. For viewers, Gunter represented the human side of Storage Wars that often went unnoticed. He reminded fans that behind every intense bidder was a family, a history, and a life far more complex than a storage unit revealed. His death underscored a sobering truth. Time catches up with everyone, no matter how familiar or beloved they become on television. And with each loss, the question grew louder. How many more members of the Storage Wars family would quietly fade away, remembered only by those who paid attention? The losses most viewers never heard about. Not every loss connected to Storage Wars made headlines. In fact, some of the most heartbreaking passings slipped by almost unnoticed, overshadowed by newer seasons, louder personalities, and the constant churn of reality television. These were people who may not have dominated screen time, but they were deeply woven into the fabric of the show and the auction world itself. Behind the scenes, several recurring figures and auction regulars passed away quietly over the years. They weren't always labeled as cast members in promotional material, but longtime viewers recognized them instantly. They were familiar voices calling out bids, trusted faces in the crowd, and steady presences that helped anchor the chaos of the auctions. When these individuals passed, There were no tribute episodes, no official announcements during broadcasts. In many cases, fans only learned the truth through scattered online posts or comments from family members. The silence surrounding their deaths felt unsettling, almost as if their contributions were erased the moment the cameras stopped needing them. For those who worked on the show, these losses were deeply personal. Crew members have spoken privately about how strange it felt to return to auction sites, knowing someone who had stood in the same spot for years was suddenly gone. The routine continued, but the absence was undeniable. This quiet erasure highlighted a painful reality of reality television. Visibility determines remembrance. Those who commanded attention were mourned publicly, while others faded into memory without acknowledgement. And it raised an uncomfortable question. How many people helped build Storage Wars into what it became, only to be forgotten when their lives ended? When fame couldn't save them. For some Storage Wars personalities, fame arrived later in life, long after careers had already been built. For others, it came unexpectedly, bringing recognition they never asked for. But in every case, fame proved to be a fragile shield, one that couldn't protect them from illness, aging, or the harsh realities waiting beyond the spotlight. As years passed, several beloved figures associated with the show faced declining health. The physical demands of auction life, long hours, constant travel, stress, and financial pressure took a toll that viewers rarely saw. When the cameras stopped rolling, the adrenaline faded, and what remained were bodies worn down by decades of hard living. Some cast members battled serious illnesses privately, choosing dignity over publicity. Their deaths, when they came, were met with brief mentions online and heartfelt but fleeting reactions from fans who had grown attached without realizing how much time had passed. What made these losses especially painful was the contrast between the vibrant personalities viewers remembered and the quiet endings they endured. On screen, they were sharp, witty, and larger than life. Off-screen, they faced mortality with far less attention than they once commanded. For fans rewatching old episodes, these moments take on new meaning. A laugh feels heavier. A confident bid sounds more fragile. The past becomes a reminder of how quickly time moves and how unforgiving it can be. And with each passing, one question grew harder to ignore. If even the most beloved Storage Wars figures could fade so quietly, who would be next? When the show kept going, but the pain didn't. As the years went on, Storage Wars did what television shows are designed to do. It adapted, evolved, and kept moving forward. New seasons introduced fresh faces, new rivalries, and bigger personalities. But behind that momentum, there was an unspoken truth that longtime fans couldn't ignore. The people who helped make the show what it was were slowly disappearing, and the show rarely stopped to acknowledge the weight of those losses. For remaining cast members, grief didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves. One familiar face gone, then another, then a quiet realization that the group they once stood beside at auctions would never be complete again. Some losses were discussed privately among the cast, away from cameras and microphones. Others were processed alone, in silence, because public grief felt incompatible with the high-energy persona viewers expected to see. What made this especially difficult was the contrast between reality and perception. On screen, the cast still joked, argued, and competed with the same intensity. But off-screen, several admitted later that the atmosphere had changed forever. Every auction site carried memories. Every familiar routine felt haunted by the absence of someone who used to stand there. For fans, the disconnect was unsettling. Episodes continued to air without explanation. Viewers noticed when a familiar person stopped appearing, but answers were rarely given. There were no title cards, no dedications, No moments of reflection during episodes. The show moved on, and the audience was expected to do the same. But grief doesn't work that way. For those who truly loved the show, rewatching older episodes became bittersweet. Laughter was now mixed with loss. Moments that once felt lighthearted suddenly felt fragile. The realization set in that these weren't just characters. They were real people whose stories ended quietly, without ceremony. And as the cast aged and time marched forward, one unsettling question lingered. How many more losses would come before the Storage Wars family was unrecognizable? The deaths that changed how fans see the show. There comes a point when loss stops feeling isolated and starts to feel like a pattern. For Storage Wars fans, that moment arrived when multiple passings began to overlap within a short span of time. It was no longer a single tragedy to mourn. It was a growing list of names tied to memories, laughter, and years spent watching the same familiar faces on screen. The emotional impact on fans was profound. Many had followed the show for over a decade, watching cast members age, evolve, and share pieces of their lives. Losing them felt strangely personal, even though most viewers had never met them. That connection, built through years of routine viewing, turned grief into something communal. Online discussions shifted in tone. Where fans once debated bidding strategies and rivalries, they now shared memories, condolences, and moments that meant the most to them. Viewers spoke about how certain cast members reminded them of family, of parents, of friends they had lost themselves. Storage Wars had become more than entertainment. It was part of their lives. What made these deaths hit even harder was the realization that the show's format rarely allowed space for vulnerability. The fast-paced, competitive nature left little room to address mortality. So when death arrived, it felt abrupt and unresolved, leaving fans to process emotions without guidance or closure. In a strange way, the losses reshaped the legacy of the show. Storage Wars was no longer just about what was found inside abandoned units. It became a reminder of impermanence, of how quickly familiar faces can vanish, leaving behind only memories and reruns. And with that realization came one final haunting question. How many beloved members of the Storage Wars family have we already lost? And how many more will time quietly take away? What the silence left behind. After so many losses, something subtle but profound settled over the Storage Wars legacy. Silence. Not the kind that comes from shock or disbelief, but the quiet that follows when there are no more explanations left to give. For fans who had followed the show for years, this silence felt heavier than any official announcement ever could. There was no final reckoning, no episode that looked back and acknowledged everyone who had been lost along the way. Instead, the show's history fractured into before and after. Before, the losses felt personal, and after, when viewers began watching with a different awareness. Familiar scenes suddenly carried new weight. A laugh echoed longer. A confident bid felt more fragile. Knowing that some of those faces were no longer alive changed how every moment was remembered. For the remaining cast members, the silence was equally complex. Grief doesn't disappear just because a camera is rolling, and several have hinted over the years that the emotional toll lingered far longer than anyone expected. Relationships formed on auction floors and behind the scenes didn't simply vanish when someone passed away. They left gaps in routines, in conversations, in memories tied to very specific places and moments. What made this chapter of Storage Wars so haunting was how ordinary it all looked on the surface. Life went on. Episodes kept airing. New viewers discovered the show without knowing what had already been lost. But for those who had been there from the beginning, the silence told its own story. One of time moving forward without waiting for anyone to catch up. In that quiet space, fans began doing what the show never officially did: remembering. They shared old clips, favorite moments, and personal stories of how certain cast members made them laugh during hard times or reminded them of people they loved. In a way, the audience became the keepers of the legacy, holding on to memories that might otherwise have faded away. And as those memories continue to resurface, one question remains impossible to ignore. When a show gives us years of connection, but never teaches us how to say goodbye, who carries the responsibility of remembering in the end? Storage Wars was never just about abandoned lockers or surprise treasures. It was about people, familiar faces who brought humor, warmth, rivalry, and humanity into our homes week after week. Over time, those faces became part of our routines, our memories, and even our families. That's why their absence feels so heavy now. The cast members we've lost didn't just disappear from television. They left behind moments that still live on in reruns, in quotes fans still remember, and in the quiet realization that time moves faster than we expect. Some were taken suddenly, others faded slowly, but all of them mattered more than the footage they left behind. Their stories remind us of something easy to forget while watching reality TV. These aren't characters who reset at the end of an episode. They carry real lives, real struggles, and real endings long after the cameras shut off. And when they're gone, all that remains are memories and the impact they had on people they never even met. So the next time you watch Storage Wars, look past the bidding wars and dramatic reveals. Notice the smiles, the laughter, the personalities that made the show what it was. Because those moments are now part of a legacy, one shaped by both joy and loss. If this story made you reflect on the people behind the show, share your thoughts below. And if there's a cast member you still remember fondly, take a moment to honor them. Because remembering is how they're never truly gone.